According to the latest exit polls, former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is on course for victory in the elections. The polls, which forecast the outcome before the election results, give his right-wing bloc a slim majority of seats over his opponents. Exit polls further suggest that Netanyahu's right-wing bloc will command 61 or 62 of the Knesset's 120 seats. According to the polls, Netanyahu's Likud party stands to be the largest party with 30 or 31 seats. However, the final results are only expected later this week.
אנחנו עדיין צריכים לחכות לתוצאות האמת, אבל דבר אחד כבר ברור. הדרך שלנו, דרך הליכוד, הוכיחה את עצמה. אני מזכיר לכם שמ-52 מנדטים בבחירות האחרונות, אנחנו על סף ניצחון גדול מאוד.
Now, according to the projections, extreme right leader Itamar Ben-Gvir will be key in helping Netanyahu return to power, with his religious Zionism bloc on track for an estimated 14 seats. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid stopped short of conceding Tuesday's election and said he would wait until the final results were announced.
שום כוונות לעצור, אין לנו שום כוונות להפסיק. כל אזרח ישראלי, דתי או חילוני, שמאלני או ימני, יהודי או ערבי, סטרייט או להט"בי, צריך לדעת הלילה שאנחנו נמשיך להילחם כדי שישראל תהיה מדינה יהודית ודמוקרטית, ליברלית ומתקדמת.
Palestinians have expressed disappointment in the Israeli election as the exit polls show Netanyahu is well placed to return to power.
كفلسطيني بعنيش إشي يعني نتنياهو جربناه في السابق وجربنا لبيد يعير الاثنين يعني بتنافسوا بالإجرام على الشعب الفلسطيني دائما بداياتهم الانتخابية تبقى على حساب الدم الفلسطيني يعني ما بيفيدونا بإشي بالعكس بيضرونا يعني اثنين احنا دمنا مقياس لهم لنجاحاتهم دم الفلسطيني.
Well, for more on that story, we're now joined live from Jerusalem by Amkai Stein, who is a journalist. Thanks so much for speaking to WION. Now, the question really is it now a done deal that former Premier Benjamin Netanyahu, who has in fact been Israel's longest-serving Prime Minister, is all set to return to power, even though opinion polls had suggested that there would not be a stable government, no single party would be able to win a majority on its own, but at the moment it does look like the Likud party is certainly in the lead. So is it all but over, you think, for Yair Lapid, even though the votes are still being counted? And at the same time, if it is going to be a coalition government that Netanyahu will have to cobble together along with other far-right parties, does that guarantee the political stability that Israel seeks and needs at this hour?
So it's a very long question, and let's begin with, is it a final result? It seems so, because we have already counted about 60% of the vote, and we are seeing that Netanyahu's coalition is getting between 62 and 64 MPs out of the 120 Knesset members. So it seems over and final. And what's interesting to see is that three parties from the left are really near the threshold of 3.25%. One is an Israeli party and one is an two others are Arab-Israeli parties. The votes are still counted, but the big problems regarding parties and the threshold are on the left. So it seems final and over. Now, the question again, like you said, people in Israel want stability and personal security. These are the two main issues. Now, the coalition that Netanyahu can form between 62 and 64, this is something that seems right now, the possibility, the feasible possibility, seems like a very stable coalition, although they will fight every day and quarrel every day. But at the end, these are people that have the same interest. We've got, for example, the far-right candidate, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who doesn't really have another option, another government to go. So the people that Netanyahu has right now an alliance with will go to a government that can stay even for 4 years, because at the end, these are people that have the same interests.
All right. So the question that then arises is, are these political parties led by the Likud party of Benjamin Netanyahu likely to be able to offer a stable government in Israel? Because we know that this is the 5th election in 3.5 years. There's already a lot of election fatigue. And this election comes at a critical time in contemporary global history, given the kind of economic turmoil that the entire world is witnessing, especially in the aftermath of the Ukraine-Russia war, and given that there is perhaps a global economic recession looming. So does it look like this is likely to be a stable coalition headed by Netanyahu? Or could, in fact, Israel see yet another election a few months down the road, which is something that some have predicted?
So I think, again, it's going to be a stable government because these people have the same interests, also regarding laws, also regarding when it comes to other issues on the table. But what we know from the past is Netanyahu usually doesn't like a right-wing government. He always looks for another party from the center, from the left, to join his coalition. And that's the way he isn't pulled to the right like he hates to be a lot of times. So it's going to be interesting that even though we have 62 or 64 or 61 coalition, will he look for this another left or central party to try and, let's say, make the government much more stable in his view, meaning that the right-wing parties won't pull him to the right every time on the Palestinian issue, on judicial issues, on other things like that. And that's the way he will look for stability. He did it in the past. It's going to be very interesting after these 4 elections. Will he do it this time?
All right, and final question, Mr. Stein, before we let you go, would it be correct to say that corruption wasn't really much of an issue in this election? If these exit polls hold and Netanyahu does in fact return to power, would that mean that voters didn't really care much about the issue of corruption? And is it that Netanyahu's image as a seasoned and able administrator is perhaps something that trumped other factors?
I think there are 2 stories to your question. First of all, the corruption question and the trial which Netanyahu is having these days on 3 different charges. At the end, the people in Israel have probably made their mind of Netanyahu's trial back then when it was indicted. It wasn't an issue in this election at the end, but the people made up their mind 2-3 elections before that when he was indicted in the first time. So the only issue that trial came into this election was the statement, we won't sit with Netanyahu because he's on trial. So that's one thing. And on the other thing, you know, no one knows if we will get the same Netanyahu or a different Netanyahu, because Netanyahu, remember, was prime minister for 12 years. He had back then a lot of promises regarding judicial system, regarding Palestinian issue, regarding personal security, regarding economic issue. And on a lot of these issues, he didn't deliver. Now, also in this election campaign, he made a lot of promises on judicial issues, on Palestinian issue regarding the right. Will he do it this time? We will need to see how much has he changed as a person, because in the past he didn't want to go all the way right. It's going to be very interesting to see if this time, when it comes as a revenge, it will be different.
Very interesting indeed. So even as the votes are being counted and the current incumbent Yair Lapid says he will wait for the final results to be announced, Netanyahu seems to have all but declared victory. But as you said, it will be interesting to see whether it is the same Netanyahu that we're going to see in the top office in Israel, or whether there will be some surprises this time around. On that note, Amkai Stein, thanks so much for speaking to WION.
Thank you.